happy, and they should be tonight, because we've got a lot of beautiful awards to hand out tonight for the Dogwood Trail. First of all, I would like to have roll call, please.
Commissioner Abraham.
Present.
Commissioner Galt.
Present.
Commissioner Rhodes.
Here.
Commissioner Wilson.
Present.
Mayor Kaler.
Present. Commissioner Abraham, would you do the invocation, please?
I will.
Thank you.
Our Father, we thank you for this beautiful day. We thank you so much for delivering our guests, our company, from so many different parts of the country safely here. We pray that you protect them and watch over them while they're here in our fair city. Return them safely home. We'd like to thank you for our citizenry who has opened their arms to our guests. Let us not forget that those things that we sometimes take for granted started out as blessings. These things we ask in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Amen. And I'd like to have Troop 7 come up front, please. And the adult leaders are Clay Englert and Randy Teitloff. Need to turn around. Okay.
To the flag of the United States of America and to its republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Troop 7. Good job. City Manager, are there any additions or deletions?
There are none.
All right, I'd like to call on Carol Foreman to come forward, please. And I'd like to say a little bit about Carol before she gets up here. Paducah resident Carol Foreman won the Community Representative of the Year Award for her volunteer efforts for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, the national organization creating hope in a comprehensive way through research, patient support, community outreach, and advocacy for a cure. Pancreatic Cancer Action Network President and CEO Julie Fleshman and Vice Chair of the Board Laurie McCaskill presented the award on Saturday, April the 14th, 2013 at the Community Outreach Leadership Training in Manhattan Beach, California. Congratulations, Carol.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, I just want to thank you for giving me an opportunity, for recognizing me today and giving me this opportunity to speak. Right now, our city is so beautiful with all the dogwoods and all the quilters here, and it's just, I just feel so honored that you've allowed me to have these few minutes. And I promise you I'll keep it at just a few minutes, but if I could just share a little bit of information with you. In 2010, I lost my father 8 weeks after he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. After his death, I was shocked to realize that a cancer as deadly as this received far too little attention. Pancreatic cancer is the 4th leading cause of cancer death in the United States. There are no early detection methods, and treatment options are extremely limited, and there is no cure. Right now, cases are on the rise for pancreatic cancer. It is already projected to become the 2nd leading cause of cancer death in the United States by 2020 or as early as 2015. It has the lowest survival rate of only 6%, lasting 5 years or more. My daddy called me his pipsqueak, and we all know that it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. We have far too few survivors to speak for this cancer. So it's left up to us to be the voices for those that can no longer speak. In January of this year, President Obama signed into law the National Defense Bill. included in that legislation was a landmark, included in that bill was a landmark legislation that will advance pancreatic cancer research. The Recalcitrant Cancer Research Act, formerly known as the Pancreatic Cancer Research and Education Act, will create a scientific framework accelerating progress and improving patient outcomes. The passage of this bill was due in part to advocates and supporters across this country and here in our local community, whose extraordinary efforts created the momentum for Congress to act. And I have numerous members of this group here today with me. Now we must continue moving forward. I'm asking our community to help us. In the coming year, 45,000 Americans will be diagnosed with this disease. 38,000 will die. We need to have Congress know that we need to have biomedical research be a priority. I thank you very much for recognizing, and I thank you for listening to me today.
And before you leave, Carol, I have something for you.
Oh.
You know, we give awards to people that do something for the community, really special, and you certainly have. And your hard work and your passion for this shows. So I would like to present you with a Duchess of Paducah Award to Carol Foreman. And I hereby confer this honor with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereunto appertaining. I have caused these letters to be made patent and the seal of the city to be hereunto affixed the 23rd day of April in the year of our Lord, Gail Taylor, Mayor.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for everything you do.
I was going to say, and Carol, did you bring us some purple ribbons?
I just wanted to leave just some information about the survival rates and the funding and a little purple ribbon. And how you
Thank you.
Oh, I wouldn't have made notes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll go on to the Dogwood Trail winners, and tonight we have Dabney Hawes here. Dabney?
Yes, thank you, Gail. Mayor Kaler, would you come forward and do us the honor of presenting our Dogwood Trail Awards? While Mayor Kaler's coming forward, I'd like to recognize all the members of the Civic Beautification Board that are here tonight. If you'll please stand. And let's give them an applause. All of these people have worked hard to help make our trail a success, but I also have to say that all of the winners here tonight and all of the people who have lighted their trees for the trail really made it the success, because without you, we wouldn't have a Dogwood Trail. So thank you for lighting up. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Our winners are just, their homes are just spectacular, and their trees are spectacular. So thank you very, very much.
You know, Dabney, I think we were really concerned this year about the cold weather and were the dogwood trees going to be blooming in time, and it actually worked out perfect. It was probably one of the few times that the dogwood trees are absolutely beautiful, and the quilters are here at the same time. And they certainly have enjoyed, we've seen them out looking at the dogwood trees, and you know, it's a great time for Paducah to have both of those events coincide.
One other thing, Gail, before we start this, we saw so many new dogwoods that have been planted this year, and that is so encouraging. We know we sold over 180 in our two sales in the last year and a half, and so we're just thankful. People are looking forward to our 50th next year, and I think it's really going to be spectacular. So thank you for that, too.
And a special thanks to Paducah Garden Club and the work they did on Jefferson, because all those little dogwood trees are blooming this spring. And I'd like to thank the Dogwood Trail Committee, Dabney Haw, Henry Barber, Ro Morris, and Carol Vanderbilt. If you all would stand out there. Thank you for working so hard on this project. And it is the most beautiful time of the year in Paducah. So let's get on with the awards.
We'll start with the All-Trail Awards.
All right. Off-Trail Award to 3263 Madison Street, Justin and Aaron Lewis. Congratulations. Off-Trail Dogwood Award to 1600 Martin Luther King Drive, Phil Hall. Congratulations. Off-Trail Award to 3250 Madison Street, Tara Wise Savell. Congratulations. Off-Trail Dogwood Award to 4301 St. Charles Court, Ken and Sally Lucas.
Can they from down? Just that one, it's right.
Congratulations. And I know that Ken has worked really hard on this.
Rose reminded me, we usually don't give awards to people who have won it, except for, we give a time frame of every 5 years. If you've won it, then we wait 5 years before you can win it the second time. But next year, with our 50th, we've thrown everything out the window, and if you've won an award before, we don't care. If it's spectacular, you can still win next year, so keep that in mind.
On-Trail Dogwood Award to 145 Red Fox Trail, Jim and Linda Gould.
This photograph does not do this justice. You had so many, we couldn't get them all.
They're red. Stick with me.
On-Trail Award to 4240 Pines Road, Stan and Missy Eckenberg. On-Trail Award to 2414 Jefferson, Doug and Linda Painter. On-Trail Award to 644 Woodland Drive, Carl and Polly Laboon.
We have Kate and Lucy Laboon accepting for their family. Congratulations. I know y'all helped.
On-Trail Award 2107 Jefferson Street, Diane and Glenn Roberts. On-Trail Dogwood Award to 2625 Jefferson Street, Jim and Betty Chatelier. That's okay.
Oh, dang.
On-Trail Award to 2100 Jefferson Dale and Donna Perry.
I'm sorry my wife's out of town this week, couldn't be here. I'm not sorry she's out of town, I'm just sorry she couldn't be here.
So that's on tape, Doug.
Donna, congratulations. On-Trail Dogwood Award to 4670 Quail Hollow, Jim and Debbie Long.
You tell 'em.
On-Trail Dogwood Award to 226 Wallace Lane, Denny Roof and Amy Troyer.
Thank y'all all so very much. It's just spectacular.
You know, another thing that makes this time of the year especially beautiful in Paducah is it's the annual Women's Club Art Show. And I asked Wanda Moore to come up and just say a little something about how many years the Women's Club Art Show has been in existence. I mean, you all had the first art show probably ever in Paducah.
We did. Thank you, Mayor Kaler and Commissioners. I didn't know I was going to do this until about 10 minutes ago. I'm very proud to say that the Women's Club of Paducah is sponsoring its 78th annual art show. It is exhibited, as you came in the beautiful rotunda of our City Hall. We like to say that we supported art in Paducah before it became fashionable. We have 54 adult artists with 142 paintings and 41 students with 50 paintings. We will give almost $3,000 in prize money, including $500 to Tommy Fletcher for the best of show. Next year, Tommy will be our featured artist, and we'll have his art around the City Hall, around the fountain at the City Hall. The exhibit will be on display until May the 4th during the City Hall hours, and on Saturday and Sunday, April the 27th and 28th, until from the hours of 1 to 4. So I'm very proud tonight to tell you that one of our prize-winning artists happens to be in the room. And this is a gentleman, Mr. Lee Hodges. Mr. Hodges is an 80-year-old plus. I'm not going to tell you how many plus. 88, he says. I wasn't going to tell that on him. He has been painting for 2.5 years. Last year, he won a first place in oils, and this year he won a third. And you can look and see there was a lot of competition. So we're very proud of him and of all of the artists. So all of you, pass the word, come through City Hall. They don't mind the traffic. For 2 weeks, we'll be here for 2 weeks. Thank you, Mayor Kay.
Thank you. And I love Mr. Hodges' story because it tells us all that we're never too old to learn something new. We're never too old to try something new. So he's a real inspiration to us all. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to just want to thank everybody for being here. Our pre-budget workshop with the city manager. Sorry.
Thanks for coming.
Hi, Aaron.
Are you gonna run it from up here, or?
Yeah, is this just?
Yep, just the right arrow.
John's gonna, yeah, bear with me.
Hi.
Okay.
If you go too fast, just hit the left one and go back.
Yeah, we're not done. Yeah, that one's. Yeah, let's do that.
Their son. Football lord, man. That's just encouraging right there.
Bye, Mr. Hodge.
Hey, Mr. Hodges. Mr. Hodges,
Oh, well.
how'd you do that? That's very encouraging. Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing your talent. Goodness.
Well, I thought I had two challenges tonight. One was to give you a little understanding of the budget preparation this year, and the second was holding that large audience, but there may be a merit badge in this for the Boy Scouts if you guys can hang out for this whole thing. Appreciate it. Yeah. Is there really? Good. It's great when young folks are interested in local government, and I relish the opportunities to help you all learn about it, so thank you for being here. My esteemed colleague John Perkins and I are here tonight to give you what we have come to call a budget preview that gives you some insight into our budget preparation, and probably most especially some of the parameters, constraints, challenges financially associated with the preparation of the budget. So this is my third budget preparation cycle, and the budget preview is something that I brought here, and this will be the third time that we've done that, and I think commissioners that have been here in the past have felt that helped prepare them for the submission of the actual proposed budget later on this year, which is part and parcel to the city manager plan for cities with this form of government, where under state statute it is the city manager's responsibility to both prepare the budget and submit it to you for your consideration, which we have a date and time and a place scheduled for that. We'll mention that later on. We want to talk mostly about the general fund tonight. In prior years, we've talked a lot about the investment fund. We think the general fund is probably worthy of spending a little more time on this year, so that will be our focus. Let me, before I go any further, recognize and thank your talented team of department directors for the work that they are putting into their budget preparation. It has become more challenging every year, and while we thought there might be some breakthrough on the revenue side this year, there really hasn't been, so it's been a continuation of what we call the new normal, which is a effort to manage our budgets with little or no overall revenue growth. Certainly, for the most part, not enough revenue growth to offset inflationary increases in a lot of our expenditure items. So a few of the assumptions and guidelines going in want to make you aware of. Taxes, we will rely on existing revenues, resources, except for the property tax, where we are going to ask this City Commission to support the 4% allowable property tax growth under state law. Now that's 4% dollars increase that can come in a combination of valuation increase and or rate increase. If you're lucky, you get all that 4% because your valuation increased. We don't know that we're going to be quite that lucky, so we're going to ask you to consider whatever small increase in millage might be necessary to combine with the increased valuation to net that 4%. We don't know what that might be today. We'll know at the time that we present the budget. Again, this year we directed submission of department budgets with current year appropriations as the target for next year. In other words, the amount of dollars in the respective budgets is what was given to work with next year. Some appropriation from fund balance will be used to balance the budget, and that's not an uncommon thing. Fortunately, this current budget year, the one we're operating in, it was not necessary to appropriate from reserve to balance the budget. It will be next year. Fortunately, John's projecting a end of the year general fund reserve that's well in excess of our 8% requirement. That's by commission policy. So we have some funds to work with. That's the good news. The bad news is that should be viewed as a one-time only use of those funds. So it's not a sustainable practice year after year after year. Do we underspend the budget every year? Yes, we do. Do we underspend it by the margin that we used to? No, we don't. And the reason for that is because our line items have become thinner, more accurate, and the amount of quote-unquote wiggle room, to choose the best of several terms that are used to describe that, just isn't there like it used to be. So expect that there will be some appropriation from the cash reserve to balance the proposed general fund budget. I have, since I've been here, encouraged department directors to conduct a program inventory and review within their budget. I've mentioned this before. Let's take a look at our budget, not just as line items, a bunch of innocuous line items as dollar signs. Let's take a look at our budget with respect to programs and activities that are provided for the public that have dollar requirements behind them. That not only allows us to look deeper down and take a more thorough look at what we're doing, but it also allows us to in a much better way assess the effects of funding cuts. To take a look at a funding cut in an innocuous way, okay, reducing supplies will save us X amount of dollars. That doesn't tell us anything about the potential impact that might have on service delivery. So if we take a look at a program and say, well, what would it be like if we didn't, say, have a K-9 unit in the police department, for an example? That's a much better way to look at those kind of things. It's a much better basis for directors and you and the public to gauge the willingness to provide a certain level of funding for services that are able to be identified and illustrated for any impacts that there might have on services from limitations in resources. Last point here, the investment fund will continue to be the source of revenue to address facilities maintenance and construction needs. So let's get right to the general fund. I have a little quote here that I've sort of summed up earlier on, that it's changed in the last 5 or 6 years since the economic downturn, and that trend has only begun slightly to recover or reverse itself. We're not there by a long shot yet, and we will illustrate that as we move forward. And we're going to start with the expenditure side, as we traditionally do. I kind of wanted to focus, or to start on the revenue side, because I think that really needs to be a focus, more of a focus going forward, but reconsider that. So we're going to look at the expenditure side. This is, again, just the general fund, which is the city's operational fund from which its major program are delivered, with the exception, I guess, in terms of major programs of solid waste being probably the biggest exception to that. But as you can see on that pie chart, almost 80% of the city's overall expenditures in the general fund are associated with personnel service. That would be wages, benefits, the whole package there. From there, it drops down big time. We see repairs and upkeep. That's a big item that lumps in any repairs and upkeeps of vehicles, equipment, facilities, and that sort of thing. And then it drops down to several lesser items, but items that are steady and items that do, in all cases, feel the effects of inflationary cost increase. If you look at any of those, utilities, not a good one to mention right now, but nonetheless impacted by changes. Fuel, the same thing. Insurance, we've all felt that at the household level. So we really want to make the point that a number of these categories, all of them in fact, are impacted by cost escalations over periods of time, and that's certainly no exception with respect to the city budget. So I want to establish tonight the fact that it's a misnomer that we can go on indefinitely doing the same things at the same level with the same essential amount of money. We'll get into that in more detail. Personnel service as a percentage of general fund expenditures. Just quickly, if you go to the far right, you will see that over a 5-year period of time, that percentage has increased by 3%. That might not seem like a lot, but it is. It's certainly suggestive of a trend. As you see, it's a steady trend that I don't know that it's peaked yet. It has certainly been on an upward swing, and it can be interpreted several ways, not the least of which to make it very clear that there's less flexibility for expenditures outside of the personnel area in the general fund budget than there used to be. It also would suggest to you that if our overall resources have not increased too much, but the percentage encumbered by personnel has, that there must be something giving in other areas, and there are, and we'll show some examples of that later on. I think this is the first slide that could suggest to you that we have had to do some belt tightening and what one of the major drivers has been. Okay, this is our employee count over a period of time from 7 to 13. We've shared this with you on numerous occasions, but I believe over that period of time we've dropped in the general fund from 307 employees down to 277. 277 the year we're in. There will be a further reduction to that next year. Right now we're estimating about 5 full-time positions will be reduced from that total. So we'll see a pretty significant increase to that number and a continuation of a trend to try to manage our fiscal situation in part through the employee count. Now again, it's unknown to me, as I believe it is to you, where there have been major reductions in service delivery or programs over this period of time. So I would like to suggest that the city has, over this period of time, become more efficient, and we're continuing to do essentially as much as we have before, more efficiently, which is what you would expect and what the public would expect. So we're happy to share that we believe we've succeeded in that regard, and that's a credit to everyone involved in the organization, including the City Commission, obviously. Wage adjustment history over that same period of time. We have 3 unions and non-unions, so we have 4 employee groups. That gives you a little idea of what's occurred over that period of time. I draw your attention to 2010, where we see 1 employee, actually 2 of the 4 employee groups had a 0% wage increase. Two had 3%. Those were contracts that had been negotiated, I believe, prior to the economic downturn. And we see where over the course of the next several years, negotiated contracts have reduced, and the non-union settlement has, remained fairly low. And we see a downward trend through 2012 and a slight upticking began in 2013. We're projecting next year an average of a little over average of 2.5%, with the exception of one union, which had a negotiated settlement of 1.5%. I think we all believe that this is a component of recruiting and retaining a quality workforce, but I believe that the city can defend that it has done a fairly prudent job in this regard. The city does not have at present, nor did it have at that time, a funded merit plan where employees were progressing outside of this. This has been largely it. So there wasn't another 2 or 3% commonly tacked on top of that for advancement on a merit scale, as there are in many public organizations. Now, as you all know, the city did commission a wage survey a couple of years ago, and as a result of that, there were some adjustments made across various positions to bring them more in accord with the market. Okay, this is an interesting one, and one we're all familiar with and have read about, and I know that it was probably the biggest issue in the legislature this year, is the cost of employee retirement. Going back to 2007, the rate for hazardous duty employees, which would be police and fire and a few other, was 28.21%. The current year it's 37.6%. The increase in dollars over that period of time, with that increased percentage of match on the city's part, has been from $1.93 million to over $3 million. Folks, that is huge. It's unparalleled by anything I think I've ever seen in city government. It is the major driver of the expense increase in the city budget, and it's beyond our control. The same statistic for non-hazardous duty employees, which is a smaller percentage rate, but as you can see, increased from 13.1% in 2007 to 19.5% in 2013. Dollar increase over that same period of time of $500,000. And you also saw where our employee count dropped over that period of time as well, but the impact is still there. Interestingly enough, I think I might have left. An interesting little comparison here. The combined increase of our match for hazardous and non-hazardous duties over that period of time was $1,588,709. So almost $1.6 million increase in expense to the city associated with our required retirement match for employees. Over that same period of time, of the four major revenue sources of the city's general fund, which are payroll tax, property tax, insurance premium tax, and business license, those four major items in the general fund combined increased by the amount of $1,254,000. So that is a very, very telling statistic that expense right there exceeded our revenue growth from our major general fund sources by $500,000. So we lost that much ground in the general fund just there. Okay, let's talk about just a few things that occurred across the departments. And this is not meant to be an exhaustive list by any means. And there may have been some worthy items left off in the interest of space and time. But I want to share some of these things with you to show you, and in a way almost to applaud and if not celebrate the work that has occurred internally in city government to try to deal with the financial situation over the past number of years. So in the police department, we see there were, by way of example, 2 civilian positions eliminated this year. Police cruisers are being kept longer. the line item called Other Services, which again is an innocuous sounding thing to you, but it's been reduced by $20,000 a year. Same thing with a line item called Field Supplies, reduced by $10,500 a year. Human Resources, reduced advertising costs by over $5,000. Technology has a lot to do with that, as it does other things. This organization embraces technology, has a very talented IT department. The City Commission supports and encourages technology. We've seen some good effects of it. Our annual life insurance program was rebid this past year, saved the city $7,000. As you all know, we combined the positions of Director of Human Resources and Risk Manager a couple years ago at a significant savings to the city. Planning Department, 1/2 position was reduced in the grant writing and administration division of there. Professional services in that department has been reduced by 37%. Office supply costs reduced by 46%. I believe the operating side of the planning budget over the last 7 years itself has been reduced by about 40%. So we're working smarter, working more efficiently, I think is the message with all that. PRDA, small budget, one-person staff. It's a little harder to point to where cuts have been made, but that shop was set up with one person in it without dedicated support, and they've managed to function without that through some pretty challenging times. I think that is significant. There have been some reduction in some clerical or supplies accounts there. Administration, mayor vehicle has been reassigned to the fleet department. Part-time wage in the city clerk's office of $8,400 eliminated. I'll let one out that the position of assistant city clerk will be eliminated in the budget next year at a substantial savings. Finance department, again, going back in time over that same period of time, has reduced its staffing by 3 full-time positions. That's a 21% reduction in staffing in that very important and very, very busy department. Fire department, over that same period of time, we've defunded 3 firefighter positions, eliminated 1 clerical position. The tuition reimbursement in that department has been done away with. Reduced minimum manning by a person in the fire stations. Inspection, former inspection department, now fire prevention. Over that same period of time, there's been a reduction in fleet vehicle count. There's been a code enforcement position eliminated. There was a building inspector position eliminated, but we thought better of that and reestablished that this past year. The demolition budget has been reduced over time, which by necessity, but could that former level of funding all be used? Yes, it could, and then some. So, you know, as the commission considers its priorities and possible changing priorities over time, those are things that we may want to revisit. Park Services reduced recreation program expenditures over this period by $127,000. Here's an interesting little nugget. We eliminated the annual print brochure at a savings of $25,000. Would we like to do it? You bet. Did people find that informational and convenient? Of course they did. These things are not always done believing that it's going to meet everybody's level of satisfaction, need, or convenience. Sometimes it has to come down to nice versus necessary. 1 maintenance worker was reduced there. PRA eliminated 1 full-time position. There have also been a couple operational reductions in funding in some of the line items in that department. So engineering and public works over that same period of time eliminated 15 positions. Reduced excess equipment inventory, sold a lot of it off for a revenue windfall for the city at the time. Has seized many opportunities to use in-house labor for work that previously was outsourced, the most recent and a very good example of that being the gutting and cleaning out of the old showroom lounge at the former Executive Inn. So a lot of people think that government ought to outsource whenever and wherever we can. I'm certainly not opposed to it, but an effect of a willingness to do things like that in-house is to raise our productivity level, and we should always be about that as well. Okay, let's talk about the revenue side on the general fund. Annual revenue growth, oh gosh, that's almost too small for me to read here. We've got 10-year increments in this bar graph here. We're just kind of showing a trend to kind of illustrate what I said early on about the way it used to be to compared to the way it is or has been. And you see that in decades past, beginning with the 80s and 90s, there was a fairly substantial overall percentage increase in general fund revenue. You could generally look forward to a growth in revenue that met or exceeded inflationary cost increase. So you could sort of match program cost increases with additional revenue that was being generated at the rate that your various forms of taxation had in place. Things changed. If you could see the decade of 2010, 2012, the first part of that decade, down to a little over 1% annual revenue growth. The decade of 2000 to 2009 was right about 3%. Keep in mind how the retirement match was increasing over that same period of time. So things have changed. It's a new ball game. It's about trying to manage at a time when revenue growth is not matching growth in inflationary costs in your major expenditure items. Okay, let's look at our individual revenue sources, our major ones in the general fund, to establish the fact that they are pretty much flat. This is our payroll tax, which is the single largest source of revenue in the general fund. How much money, John, a year does it bring in? A little over $13 million. Okay, from the year 2007 to now, you're seeing relatively flat over that 5-year period of time. You're looking at maybe $500,000 of growth. Bear in mind how much, again, the cost of the retirement match increased over that same period of time. Business license, interestingly, is our second largest source of revenue. Over that period of time, I guess it would be flat. It is actually down from what it was in a couple of prior years, but it has maintained itself, I guess, at the same level. Fortunately, it hasn't taken a significant decline, but it has not essentially produced significant additional revenue to meet inflationary cost increase in the general fund either. Property tax revenue trends, again, flat, very, very marginal growth from year to year. Not, again, suggestive that this particular revenue source is producing significant additional revenue from year to year. Insurance premium revenue trend, well, this is the sad one in terms of impacting the city's general fund revenue base. You see the sharp declines with some resurgence in 2012 and maybe a stabilization in 2013. We had 3 years of major downward trend from 9 to 13 that was suggesting that perhaps some avoidance was being practiced there as a means for folks to deal with the economic downturn, not questioning that whatsoever, but there was a significant impact here on the city budget from what had been a high of 4.7 million or so down to a low of 3.4 million this year, which is a significant decrease in revenue from that source as well. Okay, non-major revenue. This is most of the rest of everything, and it's been a little up and down from year to year, pretty flat over time. Okay, we've talked a little bit about the insurance premium tax increase as a possible means to look at for additional revenue into the general fund. Finance has done some research on that, so we thought we'd share a little bit about that tonight. As you would expect, it needs to be approved by an ordinance and published to meet the usual publication requirements. Significantly, rate changes are only allowed to begin on July 1st of any given year, and John, this one gets a little confusing for me. There's a timeline there that needs to be met.
We have to make the application with the Department of Insurance, have everything in place. The ordinances have to be passed not later than March 23rd. I think it's a 120 to 117 day waiting period. So we have to give it to them by then. So if you were to want to make an increase for July 1 of this summer, this fiscal year, you can't do it. We'd have to wait another year.
Okay, what that means, I guess, among other things, is that it would not be possible at this point to effect an increase in this particular form of taxation if we wanted it to impact this budget that we're working on now. For it to impact the following year's budget, something would need to be done by March 23rd of 2014. The average rate across the state is 8 to 8.5%. We are at 6%, just for information. So we're now proposing that this be changed for next year, in part because it couldn't at this point. Okay, that's the general fund, and I want to take just a couple minutes to talk a little bit about the investment fund. As you all know, this came about as a result of an increase in the payroll tax of 0.5% a number of years ago. That was specifically allowed for some combination of purposes associated with economic development, neighborhood redevelopment, infrastructure and capital investment, and property tax relief. Some of this information has been used in prior years. This has been viewed, and I think certainly in the earlier years was accurately viewed as a discretionary fund. I believe it's much less discretionary now than it was early on, just because of the fact that certain obligations have been imposed on it that represent commitments into the future. This fund, and this is an important point, because the general fund is not generating any excess revenue beyond what is needed to fund operational expenses. The investment fund, we are solely reliant on the investment fund for facilities, maintenance, and construction. And that is a pretty important fact to keep in mind, especially when we look at the investment fund and see how its obligations have increased and a larger percentage of it is being earmarked, if you will. I'll comment on one part of that a little later. As you know, in my first budget presentation here, I proposed and the Commission agreed to establishing a rather modest line item in the investment fund of, I think, $150,000 to allow us to do some maintenance on certain city facilities. That's been a very, very good thing to have. Rick has managed that and done a very good job with it. It's helped repair roofs, help replace windows, help replace concrete and things like that. That will be in the budget next year, and I can assure you that it's already been spoken for, probably in excess of what the appropriation will be. That was, I guess, a recognition in the investment fund of the fact that we are totally reliant on it for our needs in those areas. Much of the bonded indebtedness of the city is expensed against that fund. Is it on another slide where I mentioned that percentage? It may be coming up, but I'll mention it now anyway. For next year, with our projections of the debt service payments, which is the payments on bonds for the various bond sales that the city's done over time, we're projecting that 38% of the investment fund annual revenue next year will need to be obligated to pay bonds off. That is still in an upward trend. I think it was 30 or 31% when I first arrived. Excuse me, I guess it's 36.5%. Nonetheless, it continues to grow, at least marginally, and I don't know that the percentage or the dollar amount is so much the concern we need to have as it is the fact that when we talk about the discretionary spending ability within that fund, that it's important to note that the discretionary spending ability is actually going down as a result of the city's reliance on that fund for debt service. Current trends and priorities of the investment fund. Again, this is not meant to be an exhaustive thing, just jotting a few things down, I think, that represent a current view of that fund for what we need to be prioritizing from it, among other things. Again, I mentioned the debt service percentage is projected to be 36.5 next year. That is impacted in part by the impact of an upcoming bond sale that will be, we think, in the neighborhood of $8 million. City facility repair and replacement, we're continuing to go there and to obligate that fund where it hadn't been obligated before so much for that. I mentioned the annual maintenance item of $150,000. It's also from that fund that we have funded some of the study that's been done for this building, and that if the decision is made by the City Commission to do a rehabilitation project for City Hall, and that requires bonding, which in our view it would, then the payment on that bond would need to come from here as well. The financing for recent economic development projects that the city has been pleased to partner in also is associated with this fund. As you recall, economic development is one of the 4 stated purposes for having the fund. Also, projects, kind of in general, sort of maybe projects that go beyond, traditional facilities associated with some of our operational departments. Riverfront development being an example of that. Flood wall, I think that's very much a traditional sort of thing in Paducah. It's not so much a lot of other places, but we are embarking, I think, as you all know, on a major flood wall project, and we are needing to go there for some of our matching funds requirements for some of the design and analysis, and ultimately some of the match that we will need to make for the feds, which would, again, according to current projections of somewhere in the $20 million total project range, if we've got a 10, I'm not sure if it's 10 or 15 or 20% match, we would need to go here and probably bond and then service those bonds from this as well. Noble Park, I bring that up because one of the carryover items from last year is associated with Noble Park. What was that again? Oh yes, Duck Island, and the associated challenge that we believe the city has for stabilization of the bank, either in conjunction with that project or maybe not, depending on how you feel. But we are going to be making a recommendation for some funding from the investment fund there as well. And spent some time out there with Mark Thompson and really taken a critical look at that bank and the erosion problems that exist. And it is a serious issue that needs attention. And so as we become more aware of that or more committed to do something about it, here again, we have the investment fund to turn to look as a means for financing whatever it is that we all decide to do there. So this is a little bit of an outlook of the investment fund next year. We've had quite a bit of discussion with the commission as various projects have come up. We think we have a pretty good idea of what you're looking for in that fund. Of course, most of it's been committed. But we're projecting a revenue of $4.6 million, a small interest income, a little bit of cash carry forward, total resources of $5.1 million. Looking at proposed appropriations of that same amount, and we also would flow through this fund some expenses associated with the Olivet Church Road project, which we expect to happen. We would actually effect an interfund borrowing from another fund and flow it through the investment fund, because it would be from the investment fund that we would look to repay that borrowing when we're able to, at least for the portion of it that didn't come about through other potential means, as have been discussed with you. So, reminder, on May 28th, we are having our budget all-day session that we traditionally have. That's scheduled for 10 a.m. in the new Chamber of Commerce building. So we look forward to that. Again, a lot of hard work is going into this. Hopefully, we've acquainted you tonight with the environment, I guess, fiscal environment that we're working within, some of the major constraints issues, and invite you to, John and I, to call either one of us with any questions you might have about tonight's presentation or leading up to the presentation of the proposed budget on July 28th. So we would answer any questions you might have now.
How many years has it been since we raised the insurance premium tax?
I've been here 22 years and we've never raised it.
Okay.
In that time, that is.
Thank you, Jeff. Great presentation. And John, thank you, both of y'all, for working on that together.
I
And
certainly recognize and thank John and his staff for their work in preparing this. It's very much a team effort, and hopefully it was meaningful to everybody.
And while we're at this tonight, you know, I'm the program chair for Rotary for July.
Uh-oh. I'll get my audience that day.
And the program's going to be, I've got several mayors from around the state of
okay.
Kentucky that are going to speak about their cities and how they manage in tough economic times. And J.D. Cheney will be one of the speakers with the Kentucky League of Cities. And I have one spot still open.
Well, I think we've got a lot to crow about, so I think we need to be there and tell our
No,
story.
I would like for you to be the speaker for
Right.
July 3rd.
Oh, the week before?
July 3rd.
Okay. Very good. Happy to.
All right. Any more comments? Okay, we'll go on to our meeting. Commissioner Abraham with the minutes, please.
I move that the reading of the minutes for April 9th and April 16th, 2013 City Commission meeting be waived, and that the minutes of said meetings prepared by the city clerk be approved as written.
Second.
Any questions? City Clerk?
Commissioner Abraham?
Aye.
Commissioner Galt?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Kayler?
Aye. We'll go on to motions. Commissioner Galt, please.
I move that the following documents and bids be received and filed. Documents, insurance certificate, Heartland Cares, Inc., agreements, subordination agreement with Hoopers for 219 through 223 Broadway, 2 triple combination pumper trucks for use by the fire department, bids, engineering public works department, Ohio River Boat Launch Project, with an A, Jim Smith Contracting Company, LLC, B, Harold Coffee Construction Company, Inc.
Second.
Any discussion? City Clerk?
Commissioner Abraham?
Aye.
Commissioner Galt?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Kayler?
Aye. Resolution. I move that a resolution entitled, "A Resolution Accepting the Renaissance Area Master Plan Ramp recommended by the Paducah Development Riverfront Authority be adopted."
Second.
Thank you. Steve?
In 2009, the city of Paducah received a grant from the National Park Service. It was a planning grant to improve cultural visitation to the community, and at the time we pursued that grant, that spoke very much to the downtown and the historic districts. So we applied to the Park Service to do a master plan document for downtown Lowertown and incorporate those two neighborhoods plus the riverfront neighborhood. And in 10, the PRDA began the project in earnest with a selection of a consultant and went through a 2-year process to develop the study. It focused on 9 strategic areas that I will summarize: physical connections, critical mass, increasing tourism, a hotel analysis and a strategy which we are currently pursuing, reinforcement of downtown character, transportation, and executive inn reuse. PRDA completed its work approximately a year ago. We're bringing you this resolution to acknowledge the completion of the planning document.
All right, and the plan as amended is generalized, and
Very much so.
and the plan is to be used as a guide development, like making capital improvements. And each action within that plan will require separate and specific implementation.
Exactly, Mayor. When you say, reuse the executive inn property, that's easy to say, obviously quite hard to do in a lot of thought and effort needs to go into that. And of course, that property is owned by the city, and ultimately any policy direction you would pursue on that, or any decision you would make, would ultimately be the decision of the city commission anyway. And really, most if not all of it, because everything comes down to funding. Every implementation item practically spelled out in here requires some level of funding. Some of it's not very much, some of it's low-hanging fruit, some of it's pretty ambitious and would take a significant amount of money. And it's not anything that would, when you undertake efforts like this, it's not a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year. You're looking at a document that you would live and work with and change over a period of 20 or 25 years.
Any questions or comments tonight?
City Manager, I just want to make sure, as I understand it, with the back and forth between the Planning Commission and PRDA, what we're doing is accepting it, we're not adopting it, according to this resolution. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Okay.
It was presented to the Planning Commission for inclusion in the city's comprehensive planning documents. And after a number of months there, we could not come to resolution on that. So PRDA withdrew its application.
Well, as a member of the PRDA board representing from the City Commission, we believe this was the best way to get it to us, the City Commission, so we could look at it and review it and be able to, especially during budget time, if there were things that we might want to look at being able to do in the year. So we decided to bring it forward to us as a resolution.
Can you talk a little bit about what was it that you couldn't come to an agreement with the Planning Commission? Hence this meeting here. Hence the resolution coming directly to us.
Well, your Planning Commission that you appoint, they are the body that holds the city's comprehensive planning documents, which relates primarily to land use. That's the big element in it. And there are a number of elements in the plan that reflect land use and certainly regulation. So early on, we knew those elements were going to be included, and we felt like getting the Planning Commission to include the document would support future regulatory changes that might be made. It's not absolutely essential. It's not to say that those things can and will not happen in the future. Like there's a recommendation in the plan, which would take a lot of implementation. That would be to expand the historic districts. Well, again, easy for the plan to say it, but a lot of heavy lifting and regulatory effort would go into that. So we felt like, for those reasons, it needed to be included in the comprehensive plan. But there was a lot in the plan that, frankly, the Planning Commission wasn't too interested in. It talks about marketing strategies and tourism and some other things. It's really not Planning Commission territory. I don't think lands and properties owned by the city of Paducah is necessarily a Planning Commission item. I don't think currently zoned property that has development rights is necessarily a Planning Commission item. So those things were going to go forward regardless, but any reliance on this plan for a land use decision or a regulatory decision, they just won't be able to make. But I don't think it'll really have to come to that. They'll find some way around that should they be inclined to make those changes.
So can you give me an example of what would fall in front of the Planning Commission that was in their jurisdiction to rule on that was a sticking point?
Yeah, let me pull those up. I have those.
Just a couple.
Well, it was removal of any development on the executive end property. There was an element in the plan referred to as Town Square, which was North 2nd Street from the Market House to the flood wall. And it's right now the lands along North 2nd Street between 2nd Street and the flood wall are vacant. More than half of that property is privately held. So that was a serious sticking point with the Planning Commission. as well as redevelopment of the Executive Inn property. I think that was the major element, and that area included a city-owned parking lot, and it got out that the city wants to build a 3-story parking garage on that property. It was quite a bit more nuance to that item. Wasn't that suggestion at all, but it got tainted that way, that the city wanted to ditch parking or ditch the surface parking, or the PRDA did, and I think that was a major element. I'm sure many of you heard that along the way. Discussed it with several of you.
So if they had worked through that, and the planning commission had adopted it, it would have become part of the comprehensive plan.
I believe it's officially considered to be an attachment to the comprehensive plan, which I think is
Right.
part and
The
parcel to
comprehensive plan is not just a single document. It's
Right, but-
a series of documents.
Which we have to have by KRS, correct?
By KRS, in order to do planning and zoning, to have zoning ordinance and subdivision, we have to have one in place. And we do. We have a good comprehensive plan in place to make those decisions. And, and maybe on a total do-over, that whole thing might have been rethought and would have never been presented to the Planning Commission, because so much of the document is not Planning Commission specific. But certainly land use, transportation, and some of those things that might lead to regulatory changes in the zoning ordinance could very well be Planning Commission things.
Steve, to be clear, the mere adoption of this thing by the Planning Commission for attachment to the comprehensive plan would not have had the effect of adopting or agreeing to any land use changes in the plan. That still would have had to come before the Planning Commission.
Specific item that, again, would come to the City Commission for a land use or regulatory.
Which means it is a plan.
Right.
And
they would have used it as a finding in their decision that it agrees with the comprehensive plan. As I said, that's not to say that some of those things in the future cannot come up and the opportunity is lost. I don't think they are, but that's an obvious place where it would have been used. But I don't think we're totally cannot do those things should the Planning Commission and the City Commission at some future point decide to implement that.
That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, I think a real example, Mark, is the comprehensive plan for the park and how that has evolved and changed over time. The dog park was not part of that plan. So, things evolve and change, and many of them never get implemented.
Well, different opportunities will present themselves at different times. Private money might show up to do something, and that's a good time to do something. Or in the past, especially on, we would get these opportunities for streetscape grants. Well, if you had a plan in place that helped grease that decision making at that time. So we will look for those opportunities as they come up to how can they be implemented and how can we seek grants and private investment in that.
I just want people to understand that doing this tonight doesn't mean that it would never come before one or two boards.
If anything does, it will.
Implemented anything that would come up.
And importantly, too, it doesn't obligate the city to anything. The resolution doesn't obligate the city to implement any of these. It just says we will consider these as we go forward.
We do have somebody here tonight that would like to speak on this before we vote. So if Sharon Pope will come up, please.
Good evening.
Hi.
Hi. I'm probably going to read more than I normally do, but I want to stay concise and say the right thing. So, I wanted to say a few words as a representative of the PRA Advisory Board tonight. As you all know, PRA is probably one of those boards that will have some input as we move forward with this. The board...
Sharon, maybe pull the mic down just a little bit.
I'm so short. Is that better? Do I need to go back? Okay. The board believes strongly that the ramp includes concepts which are important in guiding everybody involved in strengthening our Renaissance area, and we all agree that's an important thing. A very important next step is prioritizing and acquiring budget dollars and other funding for the elements deemed to be most essential from the plan. Among these most important is, of course, the development of a downtown hotel to support the convention center. Two other key priorities which the PRA Advisory Board believes need immediate attention are first, the development and execution of the wayfinding plan, which I briefed you all on just a few weeks ago. And second, development of incentives and a comprehensive strategy which will help private owners stabilize, develop upper story living opportunities, and then make available usable street-level commercial spaces downtown. The PRA Advisory Board believes strongly in the importance of this second priority. The mayor and commissioners may or may not have had an opportunity to study the ramp closely. While there are many worthwhile goals in the ramp that should be worked toward over the next several years, the PRA Advisory Board would like to make clear to the Commission its opposition to a single concept that is presented early in the plan. That is the town square concept, which Steve briefly alluded to. This concept calls for development of not only a parking garage, but also construction of street-level retail in the area where the public parking lot is on the left side of Broadway in the 100 block. We are not at all convinced that a new development of buildings in this area would actually strengthen our commercial core. We would rather see programs that help owners and developers and focus on our existing downtown buildings. It is these historic buildings that give our downtown its lovely charm, so evident this time of year. After the presentation of this one concept in the ramp plan, succeeding pages of the ramp outline the importance of upper story residential development in existing buildings and the importance of these buildings. We are committed to these as the core of our unique downtown, and we hope that the Mayor and Commission agree with these priorities as we all move forward in implementing elements of the ramp. The PRA Advisory Board looks forward to working with Lisa, Steve, the PRDA Board, Jeff, and other city staff on these and other priority items. We also look forward to working with building, shopping gallery owners, artists, museum managers, and other key stakeholders in developing useful and meaningful wayfinding and incentive programs.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.
And, we certainly will take your considerations and when we make decisions concerning anything we do in downtown, Lower Town. Thank you.
It's a nice thing to finally be getting this
Right.
formally moving, so great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. City Clerk?
Commissioner Abraham,
Aye.
Commissioner Galt,
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Mayor Kayler.
Aye.
Okay.
Commissioner Rhodes, please.
On recommendation of the city manager, the Board of Commissioners of the City of Paducah order that the personal changes on the attached list be approved.
Second.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi. I don't have any comments for the personnel actions for today unless you have questions.
Looks like we're getting ready for some pool people. That's exciting for the summer.
Very active in the summertime hire season.
Any questions?
No questions.
Thank you, Cindy. City Clerk?
Commissioner Abraham,
Aye.
Commissioner Galt,
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson,
Aye.
Mayor Kayler.
Aye. Commissioner Wilson, please.
I move that a municipal order entitled, "A Municipal Order Accepting the Donation from Four Rivers Behavioral Health of a Computer System to be Utilized by the Paducah Police Department's Prescription Drug Investigator" be adopted.
Second.
Chief Perry.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager. Pretty self-explanatory for us. We're doing a lot of work with the Four Rivers Behavioral Health, and especially on the intervention side, with our new detective whose job has been tasked to deal with prescription drug problems that we have in this community. So he needed that computer, and they're going to donate that computer to us.
Good. And I read the article in the paper about the crime stats, and it looked like McCracken County was doing really well.
McCracken
Comment on that.
McCracken County is doing well. The city of
in McCracken County.
The city of Paducah is doing well also. And if you notice in our annual report, we had over 1,300 Part 1 crimes, but if you break it down, over 1,000 of those crimes were petty thefts, shoplifting, and petty theft. So violent crime is down in the city. So we had a surge somewhat inside the city, but it was related to petty thefts.
Okay. And you always get them?
Yes, I mean we're the commercial center for 4 states and maybe economic times, but a lot of people having problems, and maybe some of this related to the thefts.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really, appreciated that recognition for Chief Pederson a couple of weeks ago, because they said he always tried to not take them to jail. He tried to find some way to encourage them to get their lives straightened out, and he was really a good guy. And I know Chief Berry was very complimentary of him, and I'm just sorry that I didn't get to know him earlier. What a great guy he really is. Right, City Clerk, please.
Commissioner Abraham?
Aye.
Commissioner Galt?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Kayler?
Aye. We're going to ordinance for adoption. Commissioner Abraham, please.
I move that the Board of Commissioners adopt an ordinance entitled, an ordinance approving and recommendation of the Urban Renewal and Community Development Agency to accept the bid of Petraeus Construction for the interior rehabilitation of 533 and 535 Fountain Avenue, and authorizing the mayor to execute a contract for same. This ordinance is summarized as follows: that the City of Paducah approves the recommendation of the Urban Renewal and Community Development Agency to accept the bid of Petraeus Construction in the amount of $81,144 for the interior rehabilitation of 533 and 535 Fountain Avenue, and authorizes the mayor to execute a contract for same.
Second.
Okay, we discussed that last week. Any comments? City Clerk, please.
Commissioner Abraham?
Aye.
Commissioner Galt?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Kayler?
Aye. We'll go to our ordinances introduction. Commissioner Galt, please.
I move that the Board of Commissioners introduce an ordinance entitled, an ordinance accepting the bid of Jim Smith Contracting Company, LLC for construction of the Ohio River Boat Launch Project, and authorizing the mayor to execute a contract for same. This ordinance is summarized as follows: that the City of Paducah accepts the bid of Jim Smith Contracting Company, LLC in the amount of $2,588,465.78 for construction of the Ohio River Boat Launch Project, and authorizes the mayor to execute a contract for same.
Second.
Hey, Rick. You want to talk about this again?
Well, I'm here to answer any questions you all might have. I think probably we've discussed this project at length for, I'd say, several months, if not years. So I'll just address any questions that you all might have.
Questions for Rick?
I guess I'll start. Sorry, I've not been here for a couple of years. All right, Rick, question. And this really probably isn't this particular question. I'm going to let you all go because it's really not probably your to answer, but maybe explain that map, the 200,000 map. Where does that money come from? Is something about the street repair? And
oh, okay.
Could you help me with that one?
Talking about what we've referred to as a municipal aid program. Okay. Every time you stop at a gas pump and put gas in your car or put gas in a truck, there's a tax that's on that. Okay. And those taxes are collected by state government, and then based on your road miles and population, there's a formula in which there's a certain amount of money that comes back to your community. And in Paducah, we receive in excess of around $525,000 a year from the state. That is returns of those gas tax monies to help us repair our streets and roads in town. Typically, in a given year, the City Commission, through its capital improvement program, will match those funds, order of magnitude anywhere from zero, which was shown this evening, to as much as $750,000 a year, which couple those two together, you'll get $1.2 million worth of revenue to make street and road improvements throughout the entire city. Okay, a portion of this project has 2 blocks of Burnett Street that is substandard and is part of this project. Would we include this? I mean, to be honest with you, would we include this as a part of our road improvement program today without this project? The answer to that would be no. But in an effort to look for additional funding and that would be applicable here, we looked at those resources to help offset the, I guess, bid that came in that was in excess of our monies.
Okay. Okay, not having any background in this, and with Jeff and John's ideas about our budget, would it be possible to build this thing in a scaled-down version where we could spend just the money provided by the grant? By the
Well, Commissioner, to address that question, actually, I formulated an email today that was to address that question about reducing the size of the parking lot to bring that within the money. Okay, that's a very complicated suggestion, and I might want to elaborate with that. First off, the bid that we received, well, the original parking lot that was bid had 108 parking stalls in it that would warehouse a boat trailer combination.
sort of a double.
Okay, 108 parking stalls. In anticipation that our bids may run high, we put in a bid alternate to take off the last row of parking, which was 28 stalls, to reduce it. The number that you have before you tonight, 2.588 million, is with the reduction of 28 stalls, taking it to 80. Now we go back to the, I guess, conception of the project. What drove the project? The project was driven by, I guess, simultaneous and multiple use of limited real estate on the riverfront. As we have festivals, we can't use the riverfront. As we have boat landings, we can't use the riverfront. As we have people that wish to see the river, boaters can't use the riverfront. So now you have an extremely frustrated boating community because every time they come down here, they can't use it. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent, but my dad just absolutely would go ballistic when he would come down to the riverfront wishing to go boating on the river, and he can't use the riverfront because it's blocked for some festival. And he echoed sentiments of, that's not the precipitous of the project, but he echoed sentiments of the entire Paducah boating community that every time we want to use the riverfront, we can't, and we need to call the Parks Department to see if we can launch our boat to see whether or not it's open or not. There was an extreme, I guess, restriction to that. It just wasn't freedom. We expressed that to our master planners, of which came up with this idea to move that down there. We also had bass tournaments that were coming in, and we had boat and trailers sprawled out all over downtown Paducah for these bass tournaments. So that was another, I guess, item that drove that. You have 39 parking stalls at the riverfront as it is right now. And that's at Pool. Now this changes.
Yeah.
As the river elevation comes up, your parking stalls are being eaten up.
Mm-hmm.
This facility will maintain, currently as bid, 80 with the river elevation at 30 feet. Whereas prior to that, your stalls were being eaten up because the river was covering them up. A further reduction of that project would not necessarily yield cheaper prices because there is the Walmart principle in bidding. As quantities are up, unit prices are down. when you start changing the quantity or lowering the quantity, now the bidder is being, how should I say it, could be fouled because, wait, you promised this amount and my price was based on that amount. If you reduce those quantities, I'm not so sure I want to guarantee the price on that. It's kind of like a bait and switch kind of deal.
Quantity discount, sure.
So then you drive it into a rebid process. Now you've taken from 80, taken out another row in an aisleway, of which I looked at today, might net you $200,000. Emphasis on might, because you would have to rebid it. Okay. At the end of the day, you might have 54 parking stalls less. 54 parking stalls to use. When your goal on day one was 108, you dropped it to 80 to get it near the price. Now you're dropping it to 54 to get it in the price, whereas you'd only net 14 new parking places beyond what you have on the foot of Broadway, which would almost totally negate the precipitous of the project, is to eliminate multiple use of a facility, and you're looking for growth. We're looking for growth.
How many ramps? I was up at Kentucky Dam Marina, and it looks to me like they have 3 ramps, or maybe, I don't know, it looked like 3 ramps.
Actually, Kentucky Dam Marina has one ramp that's about 90 feet wide.
Okay, well, I was trying to, yeah.
And that one ramp will launch,
Ours would be, what, 5 or 6?
Our ramp will be able to launch 6 boats side by side. It's one ramp, not 6 ramps. It's one ramp that's wide enough to launch 6 boats. Another thing that we do have as a part of this project, if you've boated on the river, you know you can't go by yourself. Because if you have an expensive boat, as many do, they don't feel too kindly about taking $60,000, $80,000 and pulling it up on a concrete shore. So that means somebody's got to stand in the water and hold it off. Or we pay James Marine, I don't know, Mark, $10,000 a year? Up to $10,000 a year to maintain what we refer to as the courtesy dock or the courtesy barge. And that $10,000 is for the fleeting. As the river comes up, they'll pull the spud poles, move it closer, and as the river goes down, they'll pull the spud poles and move it away. That's what that $10,000 covers. Well, this has a courtesy dock, so if a person wishes to go fishing by themselves, they can launch their boat, tie it to that courtesy dock, park their car, untie it, and go up the river and go fishing and come back and not put their investment well, a lot of these boats are investments. The bass boat, tricked out bass boat these days is not uncommon as $60,000. And you know what? I'm not going to go fishing by myself, and I'm not going to stand in the water to hold the boat. So you have people that have left you. The people like my dad in the community that tired of, I guess, compete with activities, they've migrated to the lakes. They've migrated to other places because they don't have the freedom of the use of the property. Now, we did have, I guess, an editorial in the paper that talked about that, and there was portions in that there was I'm paraphrasing, but there was portions in the editorial that said it's not like we have people that are lining up to go to the river. Those people were there 30 years ago when they got tired of competing, so they left. This allows an opportunity for Paducah to have its downtown festivals, downtown activities, support bass tournaments, support freedom of use of other properties, of which all can enjoy. Whereas right now, our riverfront is 370 feet of concrete ramp, period, that we use, and we all know, for everything that goes on in downtown Paducah.
Including the tall stacks. I guess my question is what would it be worth the investigation that says, what could you build for the grant? And I'm not expecting you to answer that. That's.
I think, Commissioner, I am answering that.
Okay.
I am answering that because an investigation, of what I've done today, how much money are you looking for? You looking for 200,000? Let's just use 200,000 as a number.
Okay, I was just trying to get it, I was wondering if you could get it down to the 2.
Well, actually, it's $359,000. The 258 is $359,000 over your money.
Have we already spent part of that? We've already spent a certain amount of money preparing for the boat launch, right?
Actually, the boat launch engineering design fee is in excess of $250,000 to date.
Okay.
Is that?
Now, what happens with these things is, I know you all will wish to fuss at me, but I'm just the vessel of information, of facts, okay?
Sorry.
Redesign costs money. Engineers don't redo things for free. Time is money, okay? How long would it take to redesign it? This has to be approved through Frankfurt because this is an FHWA grant of which they are the administrator of. So if we were just to rebid the project starting this minute, it would probably be mid-August before you could start work because of going through, it's a 21-day bid process, advertisement. Then you may not get the same price you have. You might get a higher price than you have for a lesser project. I can't predict that.
I understand.
Okay?
That competitive, you couldn't go to these guys like you did the competitive thing with.
No, because we have not rejected the bids. The bids were at or near the engineer's estimate. So we didn't have grounds for doing that. Yes, it was over the money, but it was at or near the engineer's estimate.
All right.
Thanks.
Sandra, did you have something?
I was just going to mention, so it's about $2.4 million in federal and state grants that we have been given to build the boat launch. I've got
Yes,
okay.
you got 2.27 from FHWA that is usable, and then you got $150,000 that is a gold grant.
And when you were doing all the planning, you were planning for things like bass tournaments and all of those, and it's designed for that, which will bring people downtown to our hotels, restaurants, all of that activity. That's the reason why it's 6 boats wide, that many parking places, courtesy dock, all of that to increase tourism and to build our riverfront.
Is to make us more diverse with the river community and with our public.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right, this is just an introduction. Thank you, Rick. All right, Commissioner Rhodes, please.
I move that the Board of Commissioners introduce an ordinance entitled, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Mack Construction and Excavating Incorporated for construction of the Riverfront Redevelopment Project, Phase 1-A, piles and mass fill. This ordinance is summarized as follows. The City of Paducah hereby authorizes mayor to execute an agreement with Mack Construction Excavating Incorporated for the amount of $4,490,600 for the construction of the Riverfront Redevelopment Project, Phase 1-A, piles and mass fill.
Second.
Okay, Rick?
Following up on Commissioner Rhodes's, discussion about the rejection of bids and entering into competitive negotiations, this particular project did that very thing. It's public knowledge that our engineer's estimate was around $3.9 million. This is after we've opened the bids, not before we've opened the bids. And it just so happens that we received 3 bids originally. The highest bid was $8.2 million. The middle bid was $7,777,777, which was a very odd number to see, but it was an actual number. And then your low bid was $6.6 million, of which was virtually 2 times in excess of the value that you had to spend on the project. So I got with the city manager, talked to him about immediately rejecting the bids and moving into competitive negotiations with this project. Now, you might wonder, well, how were you able to get from 6 million to 4.8, or excuse me, 4.49 million on the project? That seems like a lot of fat in the project. Well, actually, we changed the gradation of the stone on that. We had a class stone that required a lot of material handling in a quarry, and the more you handle a stone, the more expensive it becomes because of the labor intensity with sizing the stone. So we looked at having a larger stone for our fill, which means the stone size, our previous stone size was anything from 500 pounds a stone and smaller, which means you got to do a lot of crushing to get it to that size. Whereas now the stone that we're using for the fill can be from anywhere from 5,000 pounds per stone to dust on that, which means you don't need to handle it as much. So our stone price dropped way down on that. Additionally, the piles that were holding or being anchored, they had a 6-foot diameter pile that was going to go into the riverbed, and we looked at the structural integrity of that, and I challenged the structural engineer, why are these things so huge? And he says, well, actually we have that designed for a runaway barge strike. And I'm like, well, we've got a landmass in front of this, and we would have to have the same flood of 2011 coupled with a runaway barge that has a 50-foot wide opening to hit those. The odds of that happening are going to be slim to none, and I think I'd have the better chance of winning a lottery with the Powerball than that happening. So we actually had him look at the structural integrity of that without the barge strike, and he was able to eliminate those 6-foot diameter piles and go with 36-inch diameter piles the full way. Well, just to kind of give you some order of magnitude of what that decision created, one group of 4 piles going in the water originally bid, the low bid was $420,000 just for 4 of them to be put in. Through the negotiations process, $420,000 went to $120,000. So, and there was a grouping of 3 groups of 4. So you multiply those savings times 3. So that's how we netted, I guess, saving the difference. Now, the interesting thing, and this is a good thing to talk about, talking about this rebid process. As a result of the competitive negotiations, your low bidder on bid day was the highest bid on negotiation day. He went from 6.6 to 5.9 million. Your high bidder on bid day was your middle bidder on negotiation day. He went to 5.6 million. And your middle bidder on bid day, which was the 7s across the board, was at 4.8 on negotiation day. So it totally changed the order of the bidders. So these rebids and these, I guess, adjustments you make don't necessarily yield the anticipated answers on rebids. So, and they get very frustrated about once everybody's seen everybody's numbers now and you rebid it, that's when the contracting community gets a little bit, how to say, nervous and tentative about bidding again.
On edge.
Edge is a good term. So that's what's gotten you here today for this particular project.
So of the 4.8 expense for the, really what to me is the infrastructure to begin to build a marina, expand down there.
4.49 million.
Okay. 2.97 is from the federal grant.
Is from HUD.
Right. A grant.
Yes. And that money is no longer available after September 30th. We do have to have that money spent and invoiced and a canceled check by September 30th.
Okay.
in order to collect that money.
Or we lose it.
Or we lose it on the 2.97.
We would lose
All right, on the
almost $3 million.
Yes.
Look, Rick, I got to ask a question on that.
Okay, that's what I'm here for.
To borrow a term from Dodge truck or Ram truck, I know you'll move heaven and earth to get that landfill of that mass out there. But my question is, what happens, and I don't know what that, if there is something unseen, unknown, be it that the Boy Scouts of America decide there is an artifact out in the river, or the mussel comes back, or a flood, or who knows. But what happens that it's the drop dead date of, is it the 20th or the 30th of September?
30th.
30th of September. And we've got 80% of the stone in the ground, or in the water. What happens to the money? What happens to the money? I mean, because we are
without being disrespectful.
Okay.
Okay, because you're kind of putting me on the spot here.
And I'm not trying to.
Well, I understand, but let me kind of, in these what if scenarios,
Okay.
would be endless. But we would lose that money. The city of Paducah would be responsible for that. But let me ask you this question: what if you don't?
Okay.
What if you don't do anything, and then we send $11.5 million? Well, we let $1.5 million of city investment go on a pursuit of a project of which we asked federal representatives to get us this money, and then we let $10 million go. What happens on that?
I understand, but
everything's a risk.
And that's another question.
Okay, sorry.
And that's okay, but
I can't answer all these questions because I don't have a crystal ball, but I will be honest with you.
where I was going with that question is it, when that's why I used 80%, it could be any percent you want. But let's say, I don't know if 80% of the stone went in the ground, that the government says, okay, we're on the hook for 80%, City of Paducah, you're on the hook for 20%. What you're saying is the program has to be finished completely.
No, what I'm saying is the money has to be expended. I'm not saying the entire project has to be completed.
The rock part
It
has
would
to-
leave the city in the position of having to fund the difference. Is that what you're getting at?
Right, so
We would obligate the entire amount of federal funding and then be left with having to find, under
Right.
that scenario, the resources to complete the fill. Is that what you're saying?
that's what I'm saying.
That's essentially what we're doing.
If we don't get the fill completely finished, then the government's going to say, you did not finish it.
No,
Totally.
no, that's not
not
what
correct.
we're saying.
We'll have our
That's not what we're
cancel check.
saying.
I think, Commissioner Wilson, wouldn't you agree when we went to that meeting a couple of weeks ago with the, I guess, grant administrator?
Jose?
Yes. It was very clear that as long as we have canceled checks and
In excess of the
correct,
funding.
Right.
correct, then we'll be reimbursed. But it has to be dated
we have
by
to send the money,
September
right.
30th.
Right.
And Rick, you've met with a contractor. I mean, everything is in line to have it placed. If we're introducing it tonight, we'll vote on it next Tuesday night. You're ready to go.
We're ready to go right now. I mean, as a matter of fact, the contractor called me today and interested. Of Mac Construction said we're ready to go, but there's a matter of your legal due diligence, entering into contracts, getting bonds, the government process of going to work. He can't be given a notice to proceed until this body has executed a vote, and you're going to vote. I'm anticipating next Tuesday to enter into a contract. That Wednesday, that contract can be executed if it's an affirmative vote. He will get his paperwork in, and we're anticipating going to work as soon as first or second week in May.
When you talk about the completion of the work, and that was just what you're talking about the bonds and all the paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
So is the September 30th deadline, not only does the stone have to be out there, or we have to spend all the government's money for that.
Mm-hmm.
There's also all the paperwork and whatever all that entails, and I'm sure there's a ton of that stuff that comes across your desk. Does that also have to be submitted? Is there
the supporting documentation that defines the expenditures has to be submitted to the Fed for reimbursement. They're not, hey, again, not being disrespectful, but we say, well, we've spent $3 million, give us a reimbursement. No, it's just like any invoice. You have to send supporting documentation that provides whoever the reviewer is comfort in writing you the check back.
But does that in effect though shorten that time horizon from September the 30th, maybe a couple of weeks or something where you get, I mean, I can imagine going through the government takes a lot of time to get those approvals.
Actually, the contract period is 180 days, okay? If you were to do the math, let's just say May the 1st, okay? And say every month has 30 days, okay? 6 months beyond May puts you in November.
Yeah.
We're going to have spent $3 million by September the 30th, but this delta or shortfall monies will still be being spent beyond September 30th. We will just have spent the $3 million, but there's additional work beyond that. Just to, if we're putting in 316,000 tons of rock and 275,000 tons was in excess of $3 million, we will have met the requirement to get our reimbursement. However, the difference in the 275 and the 316 would take time beyond September 30th to place. So there's other work, but that's your money that's being spent on that.
It should be 5 months into about a 6-month project, so you would have already spent more than half of it at that point.
Let me ask it this way, Rick. Effectively, if we don't do it and don't take the risk, we have stopped riverfront development.
Right.
That's the end of it. Done.
Well, you've actually have sent back $10 million to the Fed.
Okay.
And you have walked away from 1.5 of your own investment over the last 6 years.
I mean, that's the way I was understanding it, but I just wanted to
cut
to the chase.
That's factual.
Okay.
But the same token, I mean, in fairness, I mean, look, I can't believe that you got the bids from up in the trees down to the point of consideration, down to where they are. Great job. But we still are 50% higher than what we kind of thought. I mean, the budget was like 3 and we were at 4.5, round numbers. So we are 50% higher. I mean.
Oh, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I understand. But
It's an investment in the infrastructure of our beautiful resource of the river. And you've all been working to get to this point for years.
It's 2006.
2006. No stone left unturned, no pun intended.
Thank you, Rick. I
mean,
appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. I understand where you're coming from, but I don't know that we have much of a choice other than unless we want to stop it.
You know, I mean,
we can stop the project or we can move forward.
But understand, look, I don't have your all's long view.
No, and I get that. I do.
And
I understand
that.
that.
Happens. And I tell you what, I keep reading what what Senator McConnell said, and this really goes to the heart of this whole thing for me. It has for a long time. It's no surprise to any of you all, but I'm going to say it, is that McConnell talks about, in fact, I wrote it down. It says, the riverfront is the one common neighborhood for everyone in the area. The one neighborhood that everyone shares is the river. So the question for me for more than a year has been, is a common neighborhood, a dock, a marina, a transit boat thing, the slips, or is the common neighborhood a riverfront, a park? And
okay, let me.
Hang on, Frank. Let me just finish. So, and I have grappled and worried about this, and so finally, and I kept saying, people said, "Look, Alan, it's like Field of Dreams. We'll build it. They'll come." So I finally said, I got to have more than that. So
I guess
this weekend, I went up to the LB or to the TVA people and said, "Look, I've got to have some numbers."
The TV people?
The TVA people.
Oh.
I talked to Mark, I probably get his name wrong, Abshai, I believe he pronounced his name, I didn't get the spelling. And I said, Mark, so give me your data on pleasure boats through the lock and dams of both Kentucky and Barkley. Not belabored, he said, okay, in 2012 you had 796 total pleasure boats. 2011, 616, and 2010, 694.
You're talking about locking through Kentucky?
Through Kentucky and Barkley.
Okay.
So let's take the big number from 2012, 796. Well, let's make some easy math. Let's go round up 796 to 810.
Make it 800.
No, let's make it 810.
Okay.
Because at 810, just in my mind, if you really have sort of a 9 months, if December, January, February are so cold that nothing's going on, if you had 810 boaters and every one of them came by Paducah, that means you'd have 810 divided by 9 months would be 90 a month, and say in a 30-day month, just for grins, that's 3 a day. And the way I could think about the marina is it, to me, a marina and a a fueling facility is kind of like a convenience store that I go buy my gas from, like out there at the smoke shop on 8th Street. And they sell chips and sodas and beer and suntan lotion. I mean, the stuff they sell and diesel and gas. Well, I don't know whose business could operate on 3 people a day. So then I said to some of my friends, or actually my wife, I said, okay, Johanna, so tell me how wonderful this thing could be. I mean, could it go up by 300%, 500%? I mean, at 500%, we would have 15 people a day that would come by the riverfront. All I'm saying is it.
The one thing.
I know we're all struggling with this, but I struggle as a business person thinking, how would I make a marina and gas facility or diesel facility pay on such small numbers? I mean.
Well, actually,
do
Commissioner, the facility is not intended to run year round.
Well, I mean,
it's not intended to run during you can go to Kentucky Dam or you can go to Kentucky Dam Marina, and their marina store is not open in the wintertime.
Well,
it's locked up, and there's no.
Walter said we're closed 3 months out of the year.
And that's typical of all marinas. And in the boating community, that's typical. That's typical knowledge because they know when they're going to make their commute. They know when to make that commute. They're not making it in the dead of winter.
That's why I asked Walter Taylor, and I said, look, what? He says, we close 3 months out of the year, and so he said, you can base kind of these numbers on 9 months out of the year.
Mm-hmm.
But he is in business.
And he's busy. I said, okay, Walter, I said, how many people are these transients who really are, the snowbird kind of people? He said, 4 or 5 a month, maybe 40 a year.
Mm-hmm.
I just look at this at such tiny, tiny numbers, and I just think, I know we've spent money. I've spent money on things, and after a while said, I can't do it. I can't justify it as a business person.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm coming from, Rick, and to everybody. I'm really struggling with this.
Well, you don't, again, I'm going to say this again. I'm your representative that takes the battle to the battlefield.
I understand.
I don't declare the war.
I know that.
Okay, so this body is charged with making a decision, and whatever decision is made by that body, I will carry and/or I will move on to other projects. But the questions now have got to, as if I'm needing to be convinced.
No.
Whereas I'm not needing to be convinced.
You're just standing there.
I'm just the person that executes your policy.
I understand that completely, and I'm not trying to fight them really.
I understand, but I mean these
Rick,
questions
can I
are.
just make one more point? When you talk about the $10 million that we have gotten in federal grants for our riverfront development, obviously our community at some point lobbied for that money because we thought development of our riverfront was very important to our community. At the same time, I believe we got around $10 million. Didn't another river city in western Kentucky, Owensboro, get like?
I don't have the numbers specific, but it is approximately $40 million.
$40 million because they were lobbying for that.
Owensboro got approximately $40 million in one grant, not 4 or 5 different pieces that have all their freaking rules to it.
And they've been spending it and developing their riverfront.
It's finished.
They're done.
It's finished.
They didn't
and
have
here
a
we
muscle
are,
machine.
debating over $10 million that we would even consider not doing. I mean,
Yes, I would.
And I'll have to say, one of my recent board appointments, Erna Boykin, I mean, I didn't even ask her, but she said, we were sitting talking about her board appointment, and she said, I'm so glad we're going to have this riverfront development.
Understand?
Now, this was someone that really surprised me because as far as I know, she doesn't, she's not real prominent with what we've been doing with the riverfront. That was the first time I had heard from her. So there are many other people like that in the community that are very, very supportive of this and want it to happen. And I want it to happen. I've worked on it since 2006.
Let me explain something.
And it's-
I don't not want it to happen. I mean, you can go back to 1966, and my family, we've built a lot of projects, built a lot of buildings. I mean, I love this city as much as anybody else. What I'm concerned about always, my business background, is the money. And for example, when I talk about the riverfront, I think about, my guess is we're going to probably have a hotel. That's my guess. I'm not giving away any trade secrets here. And when the hotel moves in, and we'll be building that parking lot. Okay, so from the executive or whatever we're going to call it, but right now, Executive Boulevard Drive, down to Harrison, down to Madison, the old Executive Inn footprint are part of it. We all know that we want that to look nice for the hotel, and by making it look nice, it'll tie the hotel and those customers to our downtown. So again, we're going to get that much riverfront, but we're going to have to pay for that ourselves. So again, how do we afford it?
I'm going to take a risk here, and I'm going to go a little bit out of bounds in my position.
Watch the sidelines.
Yeah, I'll watch the sidelines. I'll keep my eye on the goalpost.
All right.
Been a boater for 51 years and have been, in recent days, made the biggest commitment to boating ever. I'm all in, you could say.
Were you born on a boat?
Almost. Been a resident of this community for 51 years, and I know all the ins and outs of that riverfront, probably as good as anybody. I've been touring river cities myself, Mark Thompson, Steve Doolittle. We actually did 800 miles over a weekend and toured several river cities of Kentucky and Tennessee and Ohio. And I made this statement on our infill celebration, throwing sand in our face, that you can't afford not to make this commitment because everybody above and below you have and are with lesser facilities than we have here and lesser resources than we have here. But they are drawing business to them. And I would invite all of you all to get in the car, drive to Liberty Park, Clarksville, Tennessee. I would invite, and Commissioner Rose, I've invited you to make a commitment to go to Chattanooga and see what 31 years of progress in their community has done for their community. They're growing like wildfire. Paducah's not growing. 50 years of census shows Paducah dying. McCracken County is not growing. 50 years of census show us dead flat. Through our economic development programs, everybody we hear from, that's a big concern. They're wanting to go to growing communities and not flat and or declining communities. These kind of programs, again, I'm getting on a stump here, but I was the biggest, I guess, naysayer to the Four Rivers Center when I first heard about it, but I'm the first person to tell you I was dead wrong, because that investment has spawned untold amounts of reinvestment into downtown Paducah, that old produce, an old water plant, lettuce heads laying all over the road down there, has turned into several $1 million of reinvestment in our community. Yes, this is a risk, but I think it's a risk that with the monies and the resources that are at hand would be irresponsible to turn away and not to take that chance.
Okay.
I think we're all concerned about just spending money, but there's a difference between spending money and investing money, and I just look at this as an investment in our downtown development and in our riverfront.
And
We just cannot afford to be left behind.
I'm not speaking to you now as a city engineer. Now I'm speaking to you as a 51-year resident of McCracken County.
So next Tuesday night it'll be
Right,
on the
next
agenda.
Tuesday, we'll be voting on this. Thank you, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.
I thought we were going to.
We're going to
Yeah, we're going to do
if
that.
everybody's agreeable to it. we wanna-
I thought we were going to vote for.
That's why we have commission meetings.
Yay.
Preliminary vote.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
We got one more.
Commissioner Wilson, please.
I move that the Board of Commissioners introduce an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance Authorizing and Directing the Mayor to Execute Amendment Number 1 of the Engineering Design Agreement with Florence and Hutchison for the Greenway Trail Phase 2 project for additional engineering design services related to the proposed underpass located at US 45 North 8th." This ordinance is summarized as follows. The mayor is hereby authorized and directed to execute Amendment Number 1 of the Engineering Design Agreement with Florence and Hutchison for the City of Paducah's Greenway Trail Phase 2 project in the amount of $5,312.50. $5,312.50 for additional engineering design services related to the proposed underpass located at US 45 North 8th Street.
Seconded.
All right, Rick.
Basically, Mayor Commission, and I'm just rehashing what was stated in the, I guess, introduction of that, or the $5,000 was to pay Florence and Hutchison to do the study that we could actually put numbers to the request of an at-grade crossing versus the engineering that was necessary to, I guess, give a more, I guess, defined answer rather than me just standing here and telling you that. It put, I guess, plans to numbers for that.
All right. Commissioner Abraham, please.
I move that the Board of Commissioners introduce an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance Providing for the Closing of a Portion of South 4th Street, aka as Myers Street, at the Wayne Sullivan Drive, and a portion of Woodward Street at South 4th Street and Wayne Sullivan Drive, and authorizing the mayor to execute all documents relating to same." This ordinance is summarized as follows. The City of Paducah does hereby authorize the closing of a portion of 4th Street, Myers, aka Myers Street, and Wayne Sullivan Drive, and a portion of Woodward Street at South 4th Street and Wayne Sullivan Drive, and authorizes, empowers, and directs the mayor to execute a quitclaim deed from the city to the property owners in or abutting the public ways to be closed.
Second.
Okay, Rick.
Mayor Commission, this is actually I guess, a remnant right-of-way that is directly in front of a portion of the Paducah-McCracken County Riverport. They've actually been using the property for some time. When Wayne Sullivan Drive was relocated back in the mid-'70s, this was just a remnant piece, and in order that they make the best use of that property, they've applied for that to be closed. And we've also asked for the waiver of the $500 application fee because they are a part of city government and McCracken County government for that. It's in our interest for them to have that. It's in their interest for them to have that. Therefore, you have the application.
All right. City Manager's report. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Next Tuesday night at the meeting that Tammy didn't know about, I'll be bringing before you a recommendation to enter into contract with an auction service for the sale of the Sheehan Bridge Road property. After doing a couple of interviews, I learned something I didn't know, and that is really how much a land auction service that you contract with is marketing of the property and getting the word out and letting people know about it and accessing networks that these folks have of interested parties. So that was very insightful to learn and reassuring, I think, of the value of that kind of service in this kind of a transaction. Each firm we spoke to proposes to spend no less than $10,000 in advertising for a sale. So the other thing is, I think we had some sense of this, but how opportune a time it is to sell farmland in this area because of commodity prices being as high as they are, which drive the interest in land, and the values go up accordingly. So it is a very good time for this, so we would expect being able to follow through with this auction sometime in May or June at the latest if you are willing to proceed with the contract. So a lot of work throughout the community obviously being done and was done and continues to be done for the quilt show in preparation, and too many examples to mention, but I do want to mention that I somewhat serendipitously became aware of some work that was done in preparation that might otherwise go unnoticed, but I think it's a shout out to the Convention Center Board to recognize some of the exterior work that was done to the Convention Center very recently that makes that facility all the more of a showplace for this. Some facade work was done. A lot of the surface was power washed, cleaned up, some painting done, some improvements of some exterior doors and that kind of thing, and it really, really shows well and is, of course, the epicenter of that show. So it was money well invested, and I think, again, a credit to not only the Convention Center Board, but also the Carson Center management that's associated with that facility that just does a really bang-up, conscientious job of managing that facility. And with that, I would ask that the Commission go into executive session for the purpose of discussing economic development.
Before we do that, I just want to mention one person that came to the rescue during the quilt show, and that's Greg Mueller. They were having a problem over at the Civic Center with the internet, and I got a phone call, and I called Greg, and he went over there after hours and took care of that for them. They were very appreciative, Greg. Thank you. Carol, thank you.
I move that the board go into closed session for discussion of matters pertaining to the following topics. A specific proposal by a business entity where public discussion of the subject matter would jeopardize the location, retention, expansion, or upgrading of a business entity as permitted by KRS 61.8101G.
Second.
City Clerk?
Commissioner Abraham?
Aye.
Commissioner Galt?
Aye.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson?
Aye.
Mayor Kayler?
Aye. All right. We will not be making any decisions, and we will not come back. We are adjourned.
I have